You have heard, I'm sure, of Florida man. How about Florida socialist woman? Angie Nixon pulls a stunner in the Senate Democratic primary, becoming the DSA's first statewide nominee ever. Data center backlash is roiling the midterms. Stacey Garrity, GOP nominee for governor in Pennsylvania, joins us on what she thinks Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro's new go slow approach gets wrong. Drug prices are down. Not necessarily what you pay, but what pharmacies are paid by insurers. Still, the trend lines are positive. Dr. Mehmet Oz, head of Medicare and Medicaid Services, on who gets the credit. Everyone, I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. When is an election surprise? I mean, a big surprise. Not really such a big surprise. Well, the answer? When a candidate works harder than their rival, touches more voters, is more visible, and has a message that resonates. Hello, Angie Nixon. She beat Alex Vindman for the Democratic nomination for Senate in Florida. Now, Nixon is a state legislature with a flair for dramatic clashes with GOP Governor Ron DeSantis. Interestingly, she joined the Democratic Socialists of America during the campaign, but kept that membership detail very much quiet. The DSA wasn't even sure she was a full-fledged member and didn't endorse her. More importantly, Nixon's a former union organizer, and she used those union relationships and on-the-ground experience to out-hustle a better-funded candidate who, by all accounts, took his primary victory for granted. Whoops. By the way, just how much better funded was Vindman than Nixon? Well, he raised more than $15 million. Nixon, less than $1 million.
I was a former single mom for 12 years, so I know how to make a dollar stretch. And I want to be clear, we knew we were going to win. I am a former union organizer, and I'm a current community organizer, and we work hard, and we go and speak to everyone. And that's what the difference was between me and Mr. Vindman, and that's going to be the difference between me and Ashley Moody, because she doesn't like to show up to speak to constituents.
Senator Ashley Moody is the Republican nominee seeking a full term. She was appointed to fill the seat vacated by Marco Rubio's ascension to Secretary of State. Moody, we should remind ourselves, will not keep Nixon's DSA membership quiet. Nixon's victory now gives Republicans, not only in Florida, but nationwide, another example of Democratic socialism on the march, which is currently their best edgy midterm talking point. Yesterday's primary results also added to an overlooked dynamic this year: the defeat of Democrats who backed impeachment proceedings against President Trump. Vindman, as you might remember, was a lead witness against Trump in the first impeachment. Trump celebrated his defeat on social media, calling Vindman a treasonous creep who, stop me if you've heard this before, should now be prosecuted. Here are other Democrats with impeachment ties who've lost primaries this year. Dan Goldman of New York, a manager in impeachment trial number 1. Diana DeGette of Colorado, a manager in impeachment trial number 2. Al Green of Texas and Sri Thanedar of Michigan, both of whom introduced impeachment articles in this Congress against Trump. Now, these losses in primaries came for many varied reasons, but taken together, they show something worth considering. The Democratic voters want more than impeachment street cred when it comes to advocacy and what passes for fight in the second Trump term. And speaking of Trump, he made a fair amount of news today on trade with Canada, North Korea, and the Iran war. And for that, we turn to Nancy Cordes at the White House. Nancy, let's start with trade in Canada. What do we know, and what did the president say?
Well, he said, Major, that he's putting a pause on major new U.S. tariffs that were supposed to go into place at midnight last night, 50% tariffs on about $20 billion worth of Canadian goods. And he said that he was doing that because he had essentially reached a deal with Canadian negotiators over their tariffs on some really important U.S. goods like alcohol and auto parts and dairy products. The Canadians say not so fast. They haven't actually reached a deal with the president. The Canadian Prime Minister said that they're making progress and they're very hopeful, but that there's still a lot of work to do.
So we don't have the details on that. How about what the president said today about his generalized satisfaction with the course of the war with Iran?
Yeah, he said that things are going very well. And he said once again that the Strait of Hormuz is open, though trade data might dispute that. He also insisted, Major, that the Strait of Hormuz is becoming less important anyway because countries can get their oil from other sources like refineries in Texas and the United States. So he said in that way it's good for the U.S. As for negotiations with Iran, he said he's not in any hurry on that front. Take a listen.
Maybe at some point, but right now I think the situation is so good, but maybe at some point. Look, it's very simple. They have to get rid of completely. They have to get rid of no nuclear weapons. Iran cannot have a nuclear. You know why? Because they'd use it, and we're not going to let them use it. So Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and they won't.
It was surprising to hear him say that the situation is so good when U.S. gas prices are still just over $4 a gallon nationwide, Major.
And also the president said something quite specific about North Korea and its nuclear weapons.
Yes, he got into detail about exactly how many nuclear weapons North Korea has. And he didn't seem to be anywhere near as bothered by North Korea's nuclear stockpile as he is about Iran's nuclear ambitions. And that's for a simple reason, he said, because North Korea has behaved itself when he is president. Take a listen to that.
He has 57 very powerful nuclear weapons. Should have never allowed it to happen. They should have never allowed it. If I were president, I wouldn't have allowed it. But he's got them. I get along with him very well. As long as we have a smart president, he's going to be fine.
The president added that he expects to meet with Kim Jong-un at some point this year, Major.
Nancy Cordes, thank you so very much. On that last point, 57 very powerful nuclear weapons. I want to bring in CBS News national security analyst Aaron McClain. He is also host of the School of War podcast. I have never seen an American president refer with that specific number to North Korean nuclear weapons. Did that surprise you?
It did. Also, the number surprised me. You've heard this term 60 nuclear weapons for North Korea be bandied about by analysts for some years now, which sort of led to this new conventional wisdom that actually the number must be higher than that. Per the president of the United States, who we presume has pretty good intelligence on this matter.
One would think.
We know. It's 57.
Is that number not alarming because it had been bandied about as a theoretical number? What does it say about the president's orientation to North Korea and its relative threat posture in the region?
Well, it's not alarming in the sense that it confirms our assumptions about what experts who focus on the North Korean nuclear program thought was probably the case. It is alarming in the sense that the Kim family in North Korea has 57 nuclear weapons per the President of the United States. We knew that, so that's not news, but this is a very dangerous regime that superintends a slave state in North Korea, supports Russia's war in Ukraine. We can make a long list of all of its bad and criminal actions, and they are a force to be reckoned with. 57 nukes is plenty of damage to be done.
And when the president says things are going so good and that the Strait of Hormuz is open effectively, does that sound to you, Aaron, whether that's true or not, and Nancy said there's plenty of trade data that suggests it's not exactly true, that what the president is trying to do is just distance himself from talking about this conflict on a daily basis?
Yeah, this is the story of the last couple of weeks, Major. The president has attempted, rhetorically at least, to park the Iran wars. This is a movement away from the cycle we were in before, where he would repeatedly threaten massive escalation, then there'd be talk of a deal. It's a little bit like the Canada tariffs thing, by the way. I couldn't help but hear echoes of Iran as you and Nancy were discussing that. We seem to have moved past that to the point where the president would like to talk about Iran less. Why? Because he's engaged in this campaign of economic warfare. That's just going to take time. It's not going to be that dramatic unless the Iranians try something in return, and it's not politically advantageous for him to be discussing it.
And when the Iranians threaten, as I believe they did today, to extract military harm or vengeance in Europe, if Europe participates in any of this new round of economic sanctions, how seriously should we take that?
Very seriously. It's actually kind of striking that since February the 28th, Iran has not done more to strike in Europe and generally beyond the Middle East than it has, given its long record of international terrorism and adventurism. abroad. Iran cannot let
It
this.
has capabilities to do some nasty things.
It does. I mean, first of all, depending on what missiles of which types it has left, conceivably it could take shots in that regard. But it's terrible.
Even with people on the ground, assassinations.
No,
and the like.
absolutely. This is a state that sponsors a lot of terrorism, so you could absolutely look for stuff like that. And Iran can't let this situation persist. America is actually, I think we're coming around to getting a fair amount of oil out of the Strait each day. The global energy markets, as a result, are not collapsing. So this stalemate is bad for Iran,
but they're
too.
not collapsing.
Stressed but not collapsing. That's not great for Iran. So I would not be surprised at all to see them do things to shake this up in the weeks to come.
So as we think about this for the next couple of weeks, what are you watching for?
Well, for one, Iranian retaliation. You could see them attacking their neighbors. You could see them trying things in Europe. There's all manner of methods that they could pursue to shift the pendulum back in their direction. It is striking to me that the president has settled on this course, because this course of protracted economic warfare is just going to take time. I mean, this is not going to be over in days and weeks if he sticks to this. This is months at best. We could be sitting here in the new year talking about this.
Wow. In the new year.
You can quote me then.
Mark the tape, everyone. Mark the tape. Aaron McLean,
Thanks,
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Let's bring in CBS News Miami investigative reporter Jim DeFede. He is also the host of their Sunday morning public affairs program, Facing South Florida. Jim, obviously the Angie Nixon story is the biggest one statewide in Florida. Talk to me about how that race went down, how big a surprise it is, and how it complicates things for other Democrats on that same ballot come November.
No, absolutely. Look, I've been covering politics in Florida for going on 30 years, and I can't think of a more surprising election night result than Angie Nixon's win. But when you take a step back and try to analyze why it happened, I think there were several factors. One, Alex Vindman wasn't a very good candidate. He was relatively new to the state, only been in the state of Florida for 3 years. He was recruited by national Democrats as well as Florida state Democrats to run. And it was a feel that he was sort of bigfooting his way into the race, raising a lot of money, having a big profile, but not having a lot of emphasis on the ground. He didn't run much of a campaign. He ended up finishing now with $7 million in the bank, even though he had raised 15. He only spent half of it, keeping the rest on tap for the November election, which he now won't be a part of. But I think the real story here is how Angie Nixon really ran a very energetic, let's put it that way, campaign. She tapped into the DSA energy. She declared herself to be the Democratic Socialist candidate, even though she had never really been a Democratic Socialist in the past. That was a relatively new moniker. In fact, the Democratic Socialists of America never endorsed her in that race. They didn't think she was going to win. They didn't think that she was truly a real DSA member. They thought she was grifting onto their momentum after Michigan and after New York and Colorado. And so they were reluctant to endorse her. So they didn't. They stayed out of the race. But here was the real key. Here was the bottom line. What you had was a situation where Alex Vindman's wife, Rachel Vindman, put out a tweet about 3 weeks ago, just at the start of early voting. 3 weeks ago, she tweeted out something fairly despicable about Angie Nixon, mocking and making fun of her clothing, saying that she was sort of a lowbrow candidate, calling her a bad person. Let me tell you something. In the Democratic primary, you insult an African-American woman, that's a real problem. And after that insult, once that happened, African-American elected officials who up until that point had stayed away from Angie Nixon because they thought she was too fringe, they jumped in to defend her, support her, endorse her, and start campaigning for her. And that's the pivotal moment in the campaign.
And the effects of this outcome on the statewide ballot for Democrats come November?
Look, it's one of the most schizophrenic tickets I've ever seen. So on the very top of the ticket in the Senate race, you have a Democratic Socialist. Right under that race, you have the governor's race with David Jolly, a former Republican congressman turned independent, turned Democrat, who is trying to run as a moderate, who is trying to run saying that he can appeal to Republicans as well as independents who are tired on an economic message, who want a better life here in Florida and don't believe the Republicans who have ruled Tallahassee for the last 28 years can deliver it. So you now have Democrats trying to argue it's a Big Tent party when it really just looks incredibly schizophrenic. You have a Democratic socialist and you have a former Republican member of Congress running and leading your standard bearers. And the result is that every Democrat up and down the ticket, I'm talking to a lot of them today, are terrified because now they're going to be asked the question, where do you stand on the DSA? Where do you stand on Angie Nixon? And just like in the way that Alex Vindman couldn't disrespect Angie Nixon and get away with it, Democrats like Jolly and others who were running for Congress have to distance themselves from her because they don't want to embrace the socialist label in Florida, but at the same time they can't disrespect her by dismissing her. So it makes their races that much more complicated.
Jim DeFede, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir. Still to come, data centers. Pennsylvania Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro was all for them. Now he wants to tap the brakes. Stacey Garrity, Shapiro's Republican challenger, has some thoughts on all that, and she joins our show. Also, the administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Dr. Mehmet Oz, returns to the Takeout. We're going to talk about prescription drug costs, fraud, and a potential mRNA breakthrough to treat melanoma. Plus, who is Mark Walter and why should we care? Well, he owns the LA Dodgers, LA Lakers, and the Chelsea Football Club. That makes him a sports mega player, but now he's looking to sell. Is a federal investigation part of that story? The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. Pennsylvania Treasurer and Republican candidate for governor Stacey Garrity is calling on the state to pause all data center developments. This move coincides with Governor Josh Shapiro's executive order earlier this week that placed significant restrictions on new data center construction. Stacey Garrity joins me now. Madam Treasurer, it's good to have you on the program. I want to play for you sound from this afternoon from President Trump talking about artificial intelligence and data centers writ large. Please, let's listen.
We're building the biggest plants anywhere in the world. And I can say if I were the mayor of a town or the governor of a state and I had a chance to get a big plant in, an AI plant or a data center, I would absolutely want it because the jobs are enormous and the money paid, the taxes paid are just enormous. And if you don't take it, you're going to be left behind because there are plenty of places that want it. So I would say that maybe it can use a little public relations help. But if I were a governor or mayor, I would want that plant in my community. And many of them are designed in a very beautiful way. It's really very positive.
How to react to that? Because you want a moratorium in Pennsylvania. You're very skeptical of not only the funding that comes from data centers, but their effect on communities in the Commonwealth. Are you in disagreement with the president on this?
So, Garrett, first of all, great to be with you. And no, I have not called for a moratorium. I have called on a pause. So I've done 5 listening sessions around the Commonwealth, had 2 teletown halls. So I've talked to township supervisors, county commissioners, local solicitors, first responders, community leaders, and they have all said the same thing. They just need a little bit of time to get this right. They need to make sure that they're able to update their zoning. Some townships haven't had zoning updated since the 60s and 70s. They want to make sure that their ratepayers are protected. They want to make sure that their communities are protected. And they want to make sure that these data centers go on brownfield sites and blighted areas. And we have plenty of them in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and not on our precious farmland.
But the president sounds much more bullish on this topic than you do. He's endorsed you. Do you think there's something the president doesn't see or hasn't heard that you have heard?
Well, yeah. So this all comes down to leadership. So if I had been the governor when the Amazon deal came around, I would have gotten all the stakeholders around the table and asked them, what do you need to be successful? What do you need to make sure that ratepayers are protected? What do you need to make sure that, that we're listening to the communities? And, I learned something on each of these listening sessions. For example, some of these local solicitors are getting bullied by Wall Street law firms. Some fire departments would have to respond if there were an issue, and they need some specialized training and perhaps some equipment. So, we have an opportunity to get it right, and they have just asked for a little bit of time so that they can do it.
Where do you come down, Madam Treasurer, on the question of non-disclosure agreements? Because many data centers require them. Some have been required in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They create a cloak of secrecy that I have encountered in many jurisdictions, really ticks people off.
It does tick people off because it just shows there's a lack of transparency. So, for example, with this Amazon deal, nobody knew that they weren't required to bring their own energy, bring their own water. We didn't know there weren't community engagement agreements, that they were getting sweetheart tax breaks. And we certainly didn't know that Josh Shapiro was getting over $5 million in political contributions from data center developers, all out of state, by the way.
So you said there's a difference between a moratorium and a pause. When I talk to people on Wall Street, they say there is no effective difference. If you're pausing, that money is going to go somewhere else, and the intentions will go somewhere else rapidly. How do you respond to that?
Oh, that's very simple. So pause is as long as it takes. And if you get all the stakeholders around the table and figure out what they need to make sure that their communities are protected and that, ratepayers aren't suffering, then that can be accomplished very quickly. But instead, we didn't do anything for 13 months, and now there's a lot of misinformation out there, and people, quite honestly, are just afraid. They don't want them in their backyard. But again, like I mentioned, we have plenty of blighted areas in our Commonwealth. We have plenty of brownfield sites where there's already infrastructure around there. And so we have an opportunity to make sure that data centers are an addition to the grid, not a subtraction.
So when you told Breitbart in July that there could be an energy production boom in the Commonwealth, and that could make Pennsylvania a national AI and tech hub, how do you align that with this hesitancy about data centers? Because as I talk to people in the tech world, they are completely interlocked. And again, if you're not there quickly, you're going to be left behind, to the president's comments earlier today.
I know. Well, like a lot of Pennsylvanians, I wanted to believe Josh Shapiro when he brought in the $20 billion Amazon deal, but he only told us half the story. And so we didn't know that these protections weren't taken care of. I did not know that communities had not been involved. I didn't know, that some of these data centers were actually going on farmland and in communities. And so we only, unfortunately, had half the story. And like I said, we certainly didn't know that he was getting millions and millions of dollars from out of state data center developers. One of them, which is basically doing the Amazon deal.
Very quickly, Madam Treasurer, how do you assess this campaign? It is perceived on the outside as a very uphill battle for you. How do you view it? And will you ask the President of the United States to come campaign alongside you?
Oh, absolutely. I think he will come and campaign in Pennsylvania for sure. At least that's what we've been told. And the polls are tightening. A couple months ago, it had the race. It was, oh my gosh, way over 20 points. The latest poll that came out had the race at 7. And so the polls are tightening. When people hear about my message of what Pennsylvania can be, because right now we rank 47th economically, we're spending $5 billion more a year than what we bring in, and we are the 6th highest state in the nation for people leaving because there's not opportunities. They know that I really just have a different vision for the Commonwealth, and we have a governor that's more interested in Pennsylvania Avenue than helping Pennsylvania families.
Republican nominee for governor, Stacey Garrity, I appreciate the time. Thank you. Next, as promised, the Administrator of Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Dr. Mehmet Oz, right here on the Takeout. Welcome back to the Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. New data shows U.S. prescription drug prices have fallen 3.1% from a year ago. That is the biggest decline since 1963. Now, the Trump administration says its Trump RX platform has, quote, already generated $700 million in savings for millions of American patients. For more on this, Dr. Mehmet Oz joins me now. He's the administrator of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Dr. Oz, good to have you here. How do you know that money has been saved? Because as I understand it, there's not a big data trove that HHS has. So how do you know that much money has been saved and that many millions of Americans have been beneficiaries of that?
Well, that money is just from the companies that have reported to Trump RX what they're saving. And we're sure it's much more
what they're
than
saving.
That's what those companies are saying, that they have actually given back to the American people. The money they would have charged is $700 million more than what they actually have been forced now to distribute.
Because to go on to Trump RX, you have a price schedule that is cash, not insurance.
Yes.
How many Americans are taking advantage of that?
Well, it's millions of people, and we're going to actually have a big announcement later this month with the president, so we'll get more specific on granular details. But I'll say it this way, 80% of the drugs that are sold in pharmacies around America are now available on Trump RX. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of why the drug prices are going in the right direction, let me just emphasize, if you're buying a medication in America at a pharmacy, anywhere, a mail order, please just check TrumpRx.gov first to make sure that you're getting the best price. Think of it as a transparency site. We're not trying to be lower than everybody else. We just want the site that Joe Gebbia and Ed Kornstein have done a great job building this out with the National Design Studio. It's elegant, easy to use, very fast, very accurate. But we have been pristine in the way we've gotten the site out there so folks can actually figure out which pharmacies have what prices.
If they want to pay cash and
if
not
they want
use
to pay
insurance.
cash.
Right.
Now, we're actually moving aggressively to force and push others to be able to get access to TrumpRx.gov. And I think that will happen over time. But if you could actually have transparency in any part of the healthcare system, Major, you're helping drive prices down. Because unfortunately, and this is something I've learned the hard way, when there's opacity in the system.
Right, when there's no compare and contrast, people don't know what their choices are.
And it's on purpose.
Right.
Why would you not tell people what things cost? Because you don't want them to know what it costs. You'd never go eat a meal and not have prices listed on the menu because people take advantage of you. So TrumpRx.gov deals with that issue. At the same time, of course, it reinforces the remarkable work that the president accomplished with most favored nation drug pricing. And that's something that I think we should spend time on because 1 in 3 Americans leave the drugstore without their branded drugs because they can't afford them, even though a doctor wrote a prescription for them.
So very quickly, Dr. Oz, explain to my audience what this most favored nation process means, and then we'll get to some of the underlying details.
You want drug companies to give you the price that they're giving other people around the world. If a German businessman can buy a medication, why would someone on Medicaid, a vulnerable person in America, not get the same price? Why would anybody in America?
Why would they get a higher price?
Right. Or a higher price. In this country, we pay 3 times more on average for the exact same medications made in a U.S. facility than people in Europe or Asia pay for those drugs. So the president said, no us. We want all the medication prices to be most favored nation. Now, we're not asking it to be price fixed. That's not good. We want innovation that the companies can then use to grow their businesses and save lives and create new cures for cancer and the like. But if you can charge a price for your medication overseas, you should be the same here. I'll give you one good example. GLP-1 medications, the so-called fat shot. Those medications were over $1,000 in many parts of America. Even if you got them from the company directly, they were over $500. We've pushed those prices down now. So you're not allowed to charge more in this country than you charge overseas. So Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, big, good, high-quality companies, one American, one Danish, have both said, fine, we're going to charge most favored nation drug pricing. Now, Major, if you're over 65 years old in this country and you qualify, we'll give you these medications at $50 a month. Why? Because we believe that these medications, which will help you lose weight, will also help you save money for the healthcare system. Right. So within a few years, we'll actually save money for the taxpayer and
fewer obesity-related disorders.
Blood pressure, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, heart attacks, all these things.
So have those price reductions actually flowed through the system? Because I've read some experts who say it's really only begun to take effect about a month ago. Have those
the prices start taking effect in January.
Okay.
So
through most favored nation.
Through most favored nation drug pricing. And we estimate, the National Economic Council estimates about $600 billion in savings over the next decade if these most favored nation contracts, the deals we have with the companies, are codified by Congress and stay in place.
And that's still a detail yet to be sorted out.
That's still being done. However, I actually think the drug companies are going to do this. You know why? Because as much as they've saved the American taxpayer money, Wall Street has rewarded these companies. The market cap of pharmaceutical industry in general has gone up tens of billions of dollars. So it's stability they want. They don't have to make a fortune every month. And just over the last 6 months, we have a 6% drop in drug prices. Think about that. That's the most ever in 6 months. So just at the time when a lot of Americans are worried about healthcare costs in general, but especially drug prices, we're seeing a 6% drop just in 6 months, much of that attributable to most favored nation drug pricing.
Got it. So how much did the Inflation Reduction Act play into this? I know you work for the Trump administration. You want to extol the virtues of its policy. But the Inflation Reduction Act did put Medicare in the position of negotiating drug prices. And I've read experts who say that is also a part of this story, is it not?
It is part of the story. It didn't, however, happen in the first year. And the reason for that was the initial negotiations. You know, people don't know how to do these negotiations well.
And they've never been done before.
Never been done before. So the first year, there wasn't really much of a savings. And there were some side effects of the legislation that actually led to increased prices, especially in the part of Medicare that pays for drugs, Part D prices. This past year, we doubled the savings with some pretty aggressive negotiating on part of the CMS team. And they have been able to get a savings that I think are more reasonable, and that's going to build over time. So it's nothing's a panacea. These are all hard-fought victories, but you put them all together, it's a pretty good story. But just in terms of total amount, the most favored nation drug pricing dwarfs the other impacts on reducing drug prices, and the transparency offered in addition with TrumpRx.gov gives control to the American people. If you're a viewer right now, you control your destiny when it comes to drug prices.
And because you've told my audience to pay attention, they will mark the next 6 months to 12 months and see if it's actually showing up on their wall. I want to ask you about something I read in the Washington Post this morning. An experimental drug that uses messenger RNA to deliver a vaccine customized to a patient's tumors effectively prevented skin cancer recurrence in a large-scale clinical trial, according to new results announced by the drug makers Wednesday. This sounds like a very big deal, and it goes to what your point was earlier about the necessity for innovation and not quashing that through price controls. How do you evaluate that lead paragraph in that story?
So I have not read the article. However, I am very enthusiastic about the ability for us to use CRISPR therapy, which is gene modification, cell-based therapies. And these gene therapies, as you're outlining them, all work well because they wake up the most powerful tool we have in our body, Major, which is our own immune system. Think about this. Everybody watching this show right now, every single person has cancer cells in their body. Thankfully, most of us don't get real cancer because the immune system says, wait a minute, that's a sociopathic cell. I don't want that guy around. Knock them out. Those cells that kill those tumors are part of our immune system. We have been using some of those cells with things like CAR T therapy, where you take T cells and you educate them about the markers on a cancer cell. You wake up the immune system to cancer. This therapy and others like it, we believe, could remind the immune system of what it's supposed to do, to get past the cloaking mechanism that cancers often have. And the part that I really loved a lot is we can make these things at scale for much less money if we let academic centers drive the ship.
This is not just about melanoma, the article says. It's about lung, kidney, bladder, and other cancers.
All the cancers where, listen, I'm a heart surgeon. If I could whack these things out, I would love to do that. Unfortunately, most cancers should be dealt with immunotherapy or other types of approaches outside of, you don't want to heal with steel all the time. You can't cut cancers out of things like the brain without doing immense damage to that organ. If you can use the body's natural ability to deal with cancer that it has always been using until, for whatever reason, it fell behind, and reawaken that potential, which medications like this could do, and maybe augment it, that's the real opportunity. And think about this. Let me leave you with one last thought.
Real quick.
The value to us giving the American people better health so they can work just one more year of a joyful work because they're vivid, because they've got the vigor required to thrive, is worth $1 trillion to the U.S. economy. So it's not just morally and ethically the right thing to do to save people's lives. You also build value for our nation. What makes America an affluent place are the American people when they're healthy.
Dr. Mehmet Oz, I've always told you the conversation continues here. You're always welcome back.
God bless you.
Pleasure to have you, sir. Next, billionaire Mark Walter and the future of some of the biggest, most valuable franchises in sports. We cover a lot of ground here at the Takeout. That's next. Well, welcome back. Still in the conversation corner. Just changed seats. You know what happens. The show's been following the Mark Walters saga. Its sports empire, it appears to be crumbling due to a federal investigation. According to the news site Puck, his efforts to bring in cash included attempting, get this, have the Lakers and Dodgers removed from their TV contracts in exchange for what can only be described as a large lump sum payment. Ben Horney joins me now. He is a reporter at Front Office Sports. Ben, it's great to have you with us. Mark Walter matters because he owns the Lakers, the Dodgers, and Chelsea Football Club. That puts him on a marquee level in the sports ownership world. What is happening to that empire, and what does this federal investigation have to do with it?
Yeah, Major, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. This is a complicated situation where everything's moving fast, lots of news coming out, possibly as we speak. So I'll do my best to explain what I know. So yes, Mark Walter, he has owned the Dodgers for over a decade now. He's only owned the Lakers for a very short time period, which we'll get into that. And he owns a stake of about 13% in the Chelsea soccer team. He made his money in the investment world. He co-founded a firm called Guggenheim Partners. He also has a personal investment firm called TWG Global. And that is kind of where the issues have arisen. Now, to get to your question, how does all of this kind of coalesce into one issue here? What happened is that his investment companies, he has a private credit arm of his business, and he also owns life insurance companies, and he was apparently using policyholders' life insurance money to fund investments, potentially such as the Dodgers, Lakers, etc. Now, we don't know all of those for sure, but it seems like he was taking policyholders' money and using it. And I'll stop there and let you get to some more questions.
Right. And if that is true, that elevates this story's importance, because it's not just about sports. It's about policyholders, what their expectations are of that policy, and money moving in places it ought not to move.
So that's correct. Although I also want to just be clear, the idea of using the policyholders' money for other uses, it's not necessarily illegal on its face. The potential illegal action here, as far as I understand it, is that his companies didn't disclose how much of that was happening. So they disclosed that there was like 1.4 billion in so-called affiliated investments, which means that they were using that money from those life insurance companies to fund other investments. And then that was last year. And then much more recently in June, in a disclosure filing, the companies noted, hey, there have been federal subpoenas due to these investigations. It's the federal government as well as the Department of Justice and the SEC. And because of that, we went and looked back, and we're actually restating our filings. It wasn't 1.4 billion. It was like close to 17 billion. So the issue is that they were, for some reason, not properly disclosing the crazy wild amount of money that they were using, possibly because there were shady things going on. Although, again, that's speculation.
Ben, and that brings us to our last question, which is, clearly Mark Walter has liquidity issues, which is why it appears he's willing to sell the Lakers, and he might be willing to sell that stake in the Chelsea Football Club.
It seems like he's trying to come up with as much cash as possible. Depending what you read, you'll see different amounts that he supposedly needs. But what I have been told is that the Lakers sale was indeed tied to this. He is trying to raise cash. He's trying to sell the Chelsea stake. I was told that those talks have been happening from before this, but they've been revived by this. And he certainly hasn't put the Dodgers on the market. But yesterday there was a report that said, well, the team isn't for sale. They certainly could accept unsolicited offers, which kind of sounds like someone saying, hey, feel free to make some offers for the Dodgers. So, yeah, it does seem like he's in need of cash.
And that's why this story matters. Ben Horney, I appreciate your time very much. Thank you. Coming up, Darlene Graham says she supports the U.S. military. Beyond that, well, she's not so sure. Our political panel reacts to that and a lot more when we come back. This is The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout, political panel time. Joining me at the Takeout tab, remember that's a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday thing now. Matt Bennett right here, Democratic strategist, executive vice president for the centrist group Third Way, and making his first appearance on the program and at the tavern, Mike Hahn, Republican strategist, former deputy digital director for the National Republican Senatorial Committee. That looks like water, ladies and gentlemen. I promise you it is not. Great to have you here. All right. So I want to ask you about what happened in Florida, and I want to ask you about it, but plenty of Republicans say today that Senate race is now done and dusted because Angie Nixon's too liberal, too progressive, too socialist for Florida. I'm sure you agree.
I like our prospects there in the Senate quite a bit. But not only talking about the Senate, this is going to have a drag in House races. I'm looking specifically at the Florida 25 race, Jared Moskowitz. She's going to have a drag on that ticket as well. And then when you look at states
because he's going to have to explain what he thinks about her and vice versa.
They're going to have to campaign together. She's going to be a statewide candidate. And if people aren't going to come out to vote for her, they're not going to come out and vote for him, really. You need to have the energy and enthusiasm at the top of the ticket, and she's not going to have it. And she has insane ideas for Florida, of all places, too, by the way.
And do you think that that has a sort of trampoline effect nationwide in Republican messaging?
Absolutely, because you're going to see the effects in the House. You're going to see it, like I said, in the Florida 25 district. You're also going to see it in places like Michigan with Abdul al-Sayed, a very similar candidate, DSA-backed, same ideas. You're going to have Michigan.
Although he's not a DSA member.
He'll say that. Yeah, I get that. But the Tom Barrett race out there, for example, that's another race that Democrats need to win if they want to take control of the House. And it's going to drag down the entire ticket.
Matt, William, what did you see in Florida? It is being said in the rear view that Alex Vindman took this for granted, assumed he was going to be the general election nominee, now isn't.
When you outspend somebody $1 billion to 1 or whatever it was, you think you're going to win, and he didn't. Look, it went from very hard to win to probably impossible to win. I do think guys like Moskowitz have identities of their own, and he has taken on the DSA very directly and very aggressively, and I think that's been really smart for him. But I agree that DSA candidates are going to hurt us elsewhere. It's one of the reasons we're alarmed about this. And
are going to spend money, $15 million, to try to deal with this going forward.
Yeah, we're working on that in the future. But now
not for this cycle, but going to 2020.
Primaries are over. We're for the Democrats now. But yeah, look, it's a problem. In 2020, defund the police was very effectively used by Republicans, maybe by you, to go after people very far from places that wanted to defund the police. So these kinds of radical things can be a real problem.
Let me ask you, though, Matt, about this energy component, because parties orient themselves to energetic supporters.
Yes.
They do.
For sure.
They have to. And there's energy here that's not imaginary. It keeps showing up.
It does. But you got to separate what the voters are saying to us and what these candidates are saying. The voters are not saying, we would like people that want to abolish prisons, the U.S. Senate, the U.S. Supreme
take over
Court,
private property, ownership of private companies.
Get out of NATO. No one's saying that. These voters are saying, we want people who will fight. We want fighters. And
we don't want the Democratic establishment who's let us down.
Yeah, we don't want these old people that have been in Congress for 30 years. We want new blood. They're right to want that, but these candidates are peddling stuff that they're not after.
Give me your assessment of that.
My take is that they're a percentage of a percentage, and they don't represent the values probably of the wider Democrat Party, but we're going to paint them as if that's the case. I mean, look, this went from being an AOC thing in New York, and this is now nationwide.
Kind of a niche thing.
Yeah, this is nationwide. We're talking about Florida,
which is what the energy's
Michigan,
about.
And now she's thinking of running for president.
Right. Let me talk to you about Alaska. Also voted last night. Mary Peltola running for Senate. You like her.
Love her.
She has a new ad out talking about her differences, not just with Republicans, but with her own party. Listen.
And I'll take on anyone, including Democrats, anyone in the lower 48 who doesn't understand what Alaska needs. They don't get that resource development is about our survival. They don't get that firearms are for feeding our families and protecting ourselves. That a secure border keeps all Americans safe.
Drill, baby, drill, guns, and border. Wow, doesn't sound like a Democrat to me, Mike.
Well, she's going to have a lot to answer for this whole Dan Sullivan shenanigans that went on there. And Republicans are very upset about this, and rightfully so. And I think the voters of Alaska are also going to be upset about this.
You think that race is competitive?
I think it's incredibly competitive. I think Dan Sullivan is going to come out victorious. Don't forget, Lisa Murkowski was a write-in. She's in the U.S. Senate. The voters out there are very, very engaged in what's going on there. And I think as more comes out on this, if she had something to do with that, people belong in prison because they deceived voters and it was wrong.
Matt, give me your take on maybe that little niche issue, but that Senate race writ large and that ad that you just saw.
Love that ad. I'm not sure about the Sullivan thing. I think that's more of a political world obsession. But I do think Mary is a great candidate. And we desperately need Democrats like that. We need people like John Bel Edwards, who won the governor's race in Louisiana by taking positions I don't share. I don't agree with Mary on some of those things, but we need Democrats that can win in places like Alaska.
That can differentiate in places where it's necessary or you're going to lose.
Absolutely. If you run as a traditional Democrat in Alaska, you have zero hope of winning.
Matt Bennett, you get the last word. Mike Kahn, great to have you here.
Thank you.
Please enjoy the tavern. I know you gentlemen do. Quick reminder, The Takeout is available as a podcast. I love it is. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and everywhere else. There you can find each show and our long-form interviews, of which we do many. Happy Wednesday, everyone, from the tavern. This is The Takeout, relentlessly curious, reliably civil, and just occasionally, not always, just occasionally clever. The Daily Report, coming up next.